Let's begin with a little local and personal history of Dragon Quest. I swear that's the only time I'll make that joke. I literally refer to it as Dragon Quest every time in private, please don't. Since I grew up in a European country, the first actual exposure I had to Dragon Quest was the 8th installment, which even removed the number so as not to drive away customers, maybe? This is a trend they continued when they released the DS remakes of 4 and 5. Only adding the number when we hit 9, and continuing the numbers with 6. Yeah, it's weird. I only bring this up because I bought all of them. The only mainline Dragon Quest games I don't own at this point are 2, 3, and let's not count 10. So you could consider me a pretty dedicated fan of the series, even if I only finished 2 of them so far. But that's par for the course with JRPGs.
Incredible! Issue 1 of the Ogre's Digest. And in mint condition.
Originally, Dragon Quest XI, Echoes of an Elusive Age, was released in 3 forms, only 2 of which were localized outside of Japan. It's all rather complicated and annoying because I wanted the 3DS version that we never got. Ultimately, they released a Switch version 2 years later, featuring the high-res 3D version of the game and low-res 2D version all rolled up in one cart. Honestly, I think they could sell the 2D one digitally on the cheap for purists and make some extra dollar, but I shouldn't give Square Enix ideas. It also featured expanded story content and a section of the game where you physically revisit the old games, and numerous other additions. The sheer amount of content added to this game genuinely wasn't the reason I patiently waited for that release. I just played every Dragon Quest game handheld, and that wasn't about to change for some fancy graphics. And before you say it, yes, I have the PS2 and 3DS version of Dragon Quest VIII, so that counts. While I was working on this review, the Switch version was ported to PS4, Xbox One, via Game Pass, and PC, so now everyone has the expanded content.
Jings! Is that...
Time for the actual review. To start strong, this is probably the best Dragon Quest. Sure, it looks nice, but I mean that on a level of mastery. This game features callbacks and homages to all the old games, but you don't need to know them to play this. Like most JRPGs, Dragon Quest generally operates in isolation, as games feature no returning characters and whole new worlds, though some of them operate as thematic follow-ups. The game feels like a celebration of its own history, with simple things like a temporary shift of perspective calling back to some smaller moments from the Super Nintendo era of Dragon Quest, to name but one example. Moving on, the story starts out as your simple chosen hero saves the world from hidden evil, and from that understanding it progresses normally, up until some wild stuff happens and the game has its own sequel built into the story. On a macro level, this is a game about smaller stories. Nearly every location you visit gets its own little story arc following people from that town. In some cases, you return later to experience a second story. The vast majority of these are engaging tales of love, redemption, and age-old grudges. Take your party member Sylvando's introduction chapter. The whole arc is character building for Sylvando, framing him as this queer knightly character, out to knock the pitiable stuffing out of this weenie prince, obsessed with showing himself as this powerful, manly figure, without doing any of the work, which itself stands as a heavy contrast to Sylvando's flamboyancy and determination. So the prince drags you around to do his dirty work, with Sylvando there to accost and encourage the prince that if he wants to be a good king, he needs to lead by example. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks from there. The game is full of these smaller tales where you, the legendary hero, help out some regular yobs and experience the world with the grand tale of good versus evil on the back burner for most of it. A minor note on the characters. I love them. All of them. They're definitely my favorite Dragon Quest crew. Sorry, Torneko. And high on the list of JRPG crews in general. I'd probably get some flack for this from some cowards, but the English voiceovers are great. Whoever's been localizing Dragon Quest this entire time has made a fine art out of adapting the series' absurdly childish Japanese sensibilities into a palatable English experience, and the voiceovers are a huge part of that. Veronica's my favourite though.
You heartless monster!
Besides, there wasn't even a Japanese voiceover until this version released. Speaking of adding new audio, I feel like I should touch on the music. The Switch version famously implemented an orchestral version of what was originally a chiptune soundtrack. It existed before, but the composer apparently didn't want it included in the original version. I wasn't too bothered by this, to be honest. A good soundtrack is still good. Like, I honestly wanted an original soundtrack option in the Final Fantasy VII remake, despite how much I loved the new one. Well, now both are available in Dragon Quest XI, and not only can you swap between versions, but you can also get the original and orchestral versions of the Dragon Quest VIII soundtrack for some odd reason. I eventually did switch to this one because this was a little too intense for just hobbling around a field. I much prefer the subdued tones of the Dragon Quest VIII soundtrack. I'm going to load the combat portion of this review with hot tips. 1. Change the battle setting to classic. Otherwise, you're stuck pointlessly running around the field without a real grasp of what's happening. This mechanic is entirely gimmicky, and I have no idea why they added it. I've only seen it confuse people as to whether it's turn-based or not. 2. Use auto battle for regular enemies. The last few games have featured a robust tactic system to manage your battles on a pretty competent level. You can set each individual character to fight a specific way, or you could just set everyone to fight wisely, and they just will. You have to take control for bosses though, or they'll wipe the floor with you. Buffs and debuffs are crucial. 3. At the start of the game, you can apply settings to make the game harder. Dragon Quest games tend to be pretty easy because they're extremely well balanced, and if you don't want to auto your way through, this is a good place to start. 4. This probably shouldn't be in this section, but whatever. Get the demo. It covers the first 10 hours of the game, which is both an obscene amount of time and perfect to decide whether it's worth getting this huge game. 5. Have fun. This game is pretty relaxing. You can avoid most encounters, and if you're too strong, enemies will run away. You could 100% just absent-mindedly grind in auto and barrel your way through, avoiding enemies to cut the fluff when you don't want it. There's a lot of flexibility in this game, more than any other in the series. As much as it's believed turn-based systems are old-fashioned, I believe the reality is that people have become more impatient, but Dragon Quest has always iterated in small ways over time to make the experience smoother, pleasant to watch, and its characters unique to play as.
If it leads us to another one of the orbs, it's worth helping, wouldn't you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I had a sudden urge to stretch my legs. Let me ask you that again.
The last thing I want to talk about is a segment of Tim Rogers' review for Kotaku. I spent most of mine avoiding plagiarizing his, but there's a point he brings up that hit me pretty hard.
In my anecdotal experience, my friends who played Dragon Quest casually described a similar pattern. They played it for weeknights, for a half an hour or an hour, after taking a bath and before going to bed. This is how I played Dragon Quest XI in New York. This is how I played Dragon Quest VIII in Minami Senju. This is how I played Dragon Quest VII in Kami Fukuoka. This is how I played Dragon Quest V in Kitaurawa. Dragon Quest games are bedtime stories.
It's true. Dragon Quest has this oddly relaxing atmosphere and gameplay loop that never fails to lull me to sleep. I put 50 hours into Dragon Quest VII way back when I was struggling to sleep in time for work, and more recently, Dragon Quest XI helped me sleep through some tough times with my parents in hospital. This experience is the main reason I waited for a handheld version of 11, and why I would only want to play them handheld going forward. Seeing this part of Tim's review made me realize I'm not alone in this.
What? Not the naughty stick! And you've taken to wielding two of them, I see! Oh, Crivens, I'll no get out of this without a bruise or two!
Dragon Quest as a series has been unfailingly classic, determined to master and reinvent itself in light ways that don't change the core experience, but do change the genre it resides in. It invented the JRPG, championed the job system, the monster-catching RPG, and much more. There's a ripple effect all down the line from Dragon Quest I, of all the games it influenced in and out of its own genre. While other games follow the trends and implement new ideas, with older game series letting go of their heritage and being forgotten altogether, Dragon Quest always remains familiar, and honestly, they're so tightly designed that they never feel quite as old as they should.